you can share this with your employees. So welcome everyone. Today's topic of the webinar is wholesalers and price problems that a lot of our clients face when we talk about Metasearch placements. So most of you and most of the people participating in the seminar are already live on Metasearch and are sometimes wondering and coming back to us, why is my hotel selling for a lower price than on other channels than my website? So you can, for example, take that example in front of you, the Andels Vienna House in Krakow. I just selected some random players here and didn't try to pick any clients. But here, for example, you can see they have a lot of prices online, but there's a €92 on a MoMA that is much, much cheaper than potentially all the other chats. And you've all came across these platforms, and it's not only on Kayak. You can also see it on platforms like TripAdvisor. Here, for example, you see the Hotel Iron Gate in Prague, and they are selling £96 on trivago.co.uk versus their official rate that they potentially sell on Expedia or their own website with 140. And this is obviously a very annoying situation. Most annoying, it's actually under the circumstance when you have your own website live, like you can see here with the hotel in Golden Sands, part of the Melia group. So they're having £124 live on their own website, but on lowcostholidays.co.uk, they're actually selling for £99. Sorry. So the big question we always get from hotels: how is this possible, and what's happening there, and what can we do? I think you're all very familiar with the concept of net rates and players like Gulliver's Travel or Hotel Beds or any other tour operators like TUI or Thomas Cook, where you obviously make contracts to and give them net rates and certain allotments. Let me now share with you my screen with a little PowerPoint I created because I wanted to show you how that setup works. One second, I just need to switch screens. So I hope you can all see now this little overview. So as you can see, we always have a situation of, empty rooms, unfortunately. So not every hotel is always sold out every night. And I always call it the situation, okay, where we need to sell our rooms. And there are many, many sales partners out there and many, many good sales partners out there that can bring us incremental business and incremental customers. So usually you speak to various market managers and you know them. You speak to the OTAs, Expedia, Booking.com. You speak to tour operators like TUI and Thomas Cook, and obviously also to guys like GTA and Hotel Beds. And usually what you do is you obviously sell rooms to them under certain conditions. And most of them have different business models, and especially when you speak to wholesalers, their business model is that you have to give them net rates, and you have to give them a certain amount of allotments that they can sell, so like 5 rooms or 10 rooms or even more. And there's basically no way to negotiate with them around net rates and allotments, because they usually argue that they have to give a certain allotment at a certain rate to travel agents, and travel agents are selling offline. And due to the catalog business and the brochure business, where prices are published once a year and then cannot be changed during the year, they need to have a certain fixed price and allotment that they can sell this room on 365 days a year, which is absolutely true if you turn back time by 15 years and before the internet came. Problem is nowadays that most of these players are not only selling to traditional sales agents, travel agents, but they also provide the inventory through XML interfaces to many, many online players. I can give you a little background about myself. I was working in a large German OTA, and what we did basically, we were dealing with hotels directly. So we were actually together as an OTA. We went to the hotel and we made a contract on a commission-based scheme. We had a 15% commission. People were able to feed us rates, gross rates, through channel managers and through an extranet. So pretty much the same model like Booking.com is doing. The big difference that we did is when we were having this inventory from that specific hotel and a client was on our website and was searching for one night, we got a rate back, let's say, for example, of €100. And on those 100 euro, we earned 15% commission. So basically, selling this room gave us a margin of 15 euro. At the same time, nevertheless, we requested the same date, the same amount of time with one of the wholesalers. Let's say we had connectivities, XML connectivities to hotel beds, to Gullivers, to Czech Travel, to Mickey. So really, like the whole range of all these partners you potentially work with. In that case, we potentially got a net rate back, let's say, of 70 euro. So a wholesaler delivered me the rate back of 70 euro. And then I was able to mark up this rate as I wished. So literally, in real time, I was able to match the same hotel for the same date, for the same room type, for the same amount of people. And I could say, okay, here I get 100 euro, final price, 15% commission, and here I have 70 euro and no margin, but I was able to price it up. And the obvious thing to do for an OTA in that situation is obviously to mark it up potentially to 95 euro. So the 95 euro obviously gives you the chance to be 5 euro below the 100 that you originally had. And these 100 euros potentially are also on the website of the hotel and also on booking.com and Expedia. While at the same time, the margin was 25 euro instead of 15. And the very obvious answer to the whole thing is, I mean, why is it possible? Well, it's possible because you signed a contract with the wholesalers and they had the technological capabilities to provide these rates outside the offline world. Now, the problem is that a lot of you say, well, is this allowed or not? And I have to say, read your contracts. I can't actually answer that question precisely. It depends on what you signed with these players. And I can tell you, in most of the contracts that I know, it is allowed. So you basically give them freedom to provide their rates across partners. And that's also, I mean, the name wholesaler actually represents exactly that very meaning. They buy a big allotment with one and provide these inventory things to many, many, many players. So it's very similar to like a big wholesaler who is buying fish from a big fish provider, and then providing it to the individual supermarkets. And the fish might have a different price in every supermarket you cannot control. So obviously with hotel rooms, this is a bit more tricky than selling fish because fish has to be delivered and cannot really be sold online. So in that case, price intransparency is not so much of a problem. So you can sell a fish more expensive in Paris. Then you can obviously sell it in the middle of nowhere in Germany. But with a hotel room and with the technology that you have online nowadays, obviously people can very easily provide prices across nations. And then obviously these prices become very, very transparent on the internet. And that obviously, when you look back a few years, and this started actually in 2003 with the first platform called Octopus Travel, and many of you might remember that these platforms are taking these rates, mark them up as they wish, and completely break rate parity, and then sell this online. And it's, I mean, again, you know, you can criticize this, you can be annoyed about this, and I completely understand the frustration of every hotel. But normally, it is something that is not forbidden. It's nothing illegal. It's simply something that came out of a situation that you potentially didn't expect because you were signing the contracts under the impression that they were giving it to the offline world. And that way, and when you think about it, it's a very good way to sell rooms because it gives you business that you would not get yourself. Now, if you now compare it, obviously, to the online world, in the online world, you're potentially competing around the same customer. So when you compete around the same customer with a wholesaler on an OTA, or even if you take it one step further on the Metasearches, and then it becomes very annoying because obviously when you can connect your own website to Trivago or to Kayak, and then a wholesale platform like Amoma is selling a lower price, it's obviously undermining your rate parity, and it's undermining your complete revenue management strategy. So now we have a lot of hotels that are they are approaching us, and the first thing they want to know is who's behind these platforms. So if you go back to, for example, Trivago and you say, okay, low-cost holiday, or like here on Kayak when you see Amoma, who's behind Amoma? Because obviously none of you has a contract with Amoma. Well, it's not that easy to answer either, because again, it depends on which partners you have contracts with. So if you have contracts with Hotelbeds, GTA, and many, many players, then obviously it's very hard to identify, because usually these kind of platforms have interfaces to all of them. In the past, like maybe 5 years ago, usually a platform had an interface to one of these players. So you basically found out that it was Gulliver's Travel behind it, and then you stopped selling through Gulliver's Travel, the problem was solved. Today, these platforms usually have interfaces to a lot of different players. You might even consider signing a net rate contract with a small, I don't know, Austrian incoming agency that promise you to sell those rates only in the Austrian market to whatever travel agents. You can never know, because in the end of the day, all these companies are technology companies, and every database can be nowadays very easily connected with any other database. So why shouldn't they provide these rates online to some big player somewhere in the world? So this is something that is really hard to control, and really the only way to control is to actually stop doing these kind of contracts. So in a nutshell, that means you should potentially discuss with these players if you can stop giving them net rates, because net rates takes you the power of control over your price. So ideally, if you want to have a price control, you give a gross price to all of your sales partners, which is usually the best thing you can do via a channel manager. And then provide these players only with the price you provide to anybody else, and which I usually consider as fair, because if Gulliver's Travel is a good partner, why shouldn't they be able to sell you on a gross price on a commission base, just like Booking or Expedia does? So you give basically all sales partners the same chances, and if they really deliver to an audience that you couldn't get yourself, then they should still be able to deliver you the business. If they are just reaching out to a target that you target yourself and they have the advantage of the price, it's quite easy to deliver business to a hotel when you have a lower price than anybody else. Usually, and that's my personal subjective opinion, if you work with a sales partner, price should not be the reason why they sell your hotel. It should be the reason that they have an audience that nobody else can actually get for you. So I think this is a very critical discussion and a very fair discussion to make with your wholesale partners. So put them in the same position by providing them with the same price you provide to the OTAs. That obviously requires channel management connects, and that requires obviously that they also adapt to the business model, because instead of having a net rate, you in future will give them a commission. Yeah, so they would obviously have to work on commission, and potentially also no prepayment anymore, but potentially even payment in the hotel. A lot of the big players like Gulliver's and Hotelbeds are actually providing these offers and or these technology connects. Many of them not necessarily proactively recommend that or offer that to you, but technically most of them are capable of doing it. So why not ask them? I think it's a fair approach and a fair discussion to take, and basically connect them through a channel manager that you hopefully own, and then provide them with the gross rates. Still, even if payment is done not in your hotel, there's always still a risk. We keep on seeing issues, and a lot of hotels confirm that to us, that even though you provided a gross rate, because of the payment that has been done on the side of the OTA or on the side of the wholesaler, sometimes partners reduce the gross rate and finance the gap or the loss on the rate through the commission that they get less. So, for example, if you sign a contract with a wholesaler and you pay them 27% commission on a gross rate, and you give them 100 euro gross rate, they might sell it for 90 euro instead, because you might think, okay, I gave them a gross rate for 100 euro, but they sell it for 90 because they have 27% commission. In that case, they just give up on 10, and then they're going to do 17% commission instead. So that is obviously something that needs to be monitored. And I can only recommend to you to use tools like, for example, OTA Insight, for example, because these tools are monitoring for you also Metasearches and all sorts of platforms, and compare your price parity. And if there's any break in price parity, you can get an alert and can immediately act. Another question we usually get is, how can we get the information about who's behind a MoMA? Well, that's a very, very difficult answer to give, because the only pragmatic way is just making a test booking. Calling a MoMA and dealing with them is usually nothing hotels are successful on. They don't have a customer contact center. They don't have a hotel contact center. So usually they don't answer. I mean, at least I haven't seen them answer yet so far. So the only way is really to make a test booking. I've been doing test bookings, well, it feels like all my life. We keep on doing this for hotels once in a while just to find out who's behind it. And that's really the only way. And I know sometimes it's hard because the rates are not, you cannot cancel the rate, and you have to pay basically for your own room. But if you want to solve the problem, unfortunately, that's the only way to do. Sometimes you can see the provider behind it by going in the terms and conditions of the platform, but that's very rare, and that's usually not the case that you can actually find it out that way. So test bookings is really the only possible way. So now, obviously, we understood why these rates are distributed, because you give them out, and they just mark it up and distribute it across the net. And it can become quite tricky. I mean, for example, and it's not only with wholesalers, by the way, it can also be tricky with other partners. I mean, I had the example of a hotel that in Sweden who was giving a lower rate to an OTA, and that lower rate was given to be sold only in America. So they were telling them, okay, please sell my rate only in America. So they said, for example, only for people in New York coming to Sweden are getting a lower rate through that OTA, but if somebody in Sweden is researching for that for the same day, the price would be higher, because Swedish people are paying higher prices, so they want it to be more attractive to Americans. Now the problem was that this OTA also has a big affiliate business. In that affiliate business, they're providing the rates to many other OTAs. For example, Get a Room. Get a Room is accessing the rates of that OTA. Still, Get a Room is not a Swedish platform, so still no harm done. You could still argue, okay, nothing worse happened. Then, nevertheless, Get a Room was connected to to Hotels Combined. Hotels Combined is a Metasearch player in Australia. So Hotels Combined was then providing the lower rate on Hotels Combined to all their clients in Australia and other platforms. Still something completely normal and still okay, because obviously Australians are just as good as Americans, so let them have the lower price. Nevertheless, Hotels Combined is providing their Metasearch technology to Momondo. And Momondo itself is the biggest Metasearch player in Sweden. So all of a sudden, the rate that was actually given out to an OTA to be sold in the US ended up through 3 more different steps on a Metasearch in Sweden to Swedish players. So again, it's very important to understand, if you make a contract with sales partners, with OTAs or wholesalers, always think about the value chain and the supply chain of how rates can travel from A to B. And just to make matters worse, it can become even more difficult if you start giving out net rates to all sorts of players and they're going to sell it mobile. Because mobile, it's impossible to control. Nowadays, on meta searches, you can actually control it. You can search yourself, you can look yourself, and it's fine. But on the other side, on mobile, it's almost impossible to control, because you never know if there's an OTA selling through an app to a specific client a lower rate. You will not be able to control it. So I would say, in today's world, working on net rates with a fixed net rate every day and on an allotment is extremely dangerous, because you lose complete control and you have no transparency on which prices end up everywhere. And prices are obviously one of the most important features of a brand, because if you want to be reliable and trustworthy as a brand, I think it's very important to have a consistent price across channels. And also, obviously, from a yield management strategy, if you sell much lower prices through wholesalers, you're pushing your hotel on a completely wrong price point. Let's take this example again that we had in Prague. Yeah, it's a 5-star hotel, and the yield manager in the hotel actually wants to sell this room for £140 today. But the actual platform, Elbow Line, is selling them for 96. And now this is transparent on Trivago, and everybody can see it. So you're selling 50% than your selling price. On top of that, of the £96, the net rate behind it is potentially only £60. So your yield management situation is somewhere that you want to earn 140, but Elbow Line is actually delivering you rooms indirectly through the wholesalers for potentially only £60. So you're actually losing out on almost 80 pounds and more than 50% of your room rate, which is completely messing up your revenue management strategy and your profit and loss. And now I can give you a few examples, because a lot of hotels now tell me, well, okay, I understood this, and yes, I have to stop selling through wholesalers. But my problem is that wholesalers are presenting a huge amount of my business. So I have one hotel in Germany, and they actually produce around 500,000 euro a year through wholesale players. It is a 150-room hotel close to an airport, and they hand out around 70 rooms a day on allotments to wholesalers. So turning off wholesalers obviously producing a big risk, because they are afraid that they're going to lose the $500,000 or 500,000 euros. So the question that came to me is like, what happens if I turn this off? Will I be able to actually substitute that business through other channels? I get these questions a lot, and yes, we have a lot of experience with it, and no, there's never a guarantee. But experience shows that you can substitute the business, but you need to monitor it closely. So in this case, for the hotel, we actually did an analysis. The first analysis we did was we looked at the allotments, and we looked at how many of these allotments every day have actually been consumed. Because a lot of times, obviously, these players ask for big allotments, like 10 rooms or 20 rooms. And then if you figure out at the end of the year how many of these rooms have actually been sold, it's actually not that much. Very interestingly enough, we found out that only 25% of the allotments have been consumed at all, which is crazy in my eyes, because of 70 rooms or 75 rooms a day, actually, I mean, less than 20 rooms were actually sold every day. So they have been blocking away more than 70 rooms every day, which completely changed the yield management situation, and obviously the price influence on the public rates. Now, the big problem is that most of these allotments came back on a 5-day release. So on that 5-day release, obviously people were all of a sudden having 60 rooms back in their selling pipeline. And 5 days close to arrival, getting back 60 rooms or 50 rooms that haven't been sold is producing a huge issue. So what is the hotel going to do when they have 5 days before arrival, 50 rooms left? Usually you have to lower the price, right? Because you have to sell them short term. So you rather lower the price, or the other option is you do overbookings. If you do overbookings, you nevertheless take the risk that they still take the allotment, and then you have a problem. And then depending on your location, the overbookings might cause a big problem. So obviously this doesn't make a lot of sense in my eyes, right? And then the other argument that wholesalers bring is that they deliver business to you in low season and not in high season, or not so much in high season. And that's the reason also why they want to have allotments every day in the year. So we actually took this hotel and we had a look of which days these allotments were actually consumed. So we found out that during high season, that means when the hotel had more than 90% occupancy, around 33% of the allotments have been consumed. And on days where people had around below 70% occupancy, when people had actually, I'm sorry everyone, it's a bit noisy in the background. I mean, if you can please put it on mute, because it's a bit, we have a lot of background noise. Thank you. So in the low season, when the hotel was below 70% occupancy, only 11% of the allotment has been consumed. And I think every hotel, every one of you can make this analysis. When your sales partners or your distribution partners deliver your business, do they really deliver in off-season, and how much of the allotment has been consumed? It's a very easy Excel file. I mean, you can just put it all in an Excel file every day, and you can basically make the analysis yourself and find out how good your distribution partner generally is. I'm sorry, I think it must be Russian in the background, but somebody is speaking in the background, which is a little bit too noisy. So if you can put it on mute, that would be perfect. Thank you. So the big question now in this hotel was, okay, if this partner is not delivering in low season, and if most of the allotments have been consumed in days above 90% occupancy, the clear argument is, I mean, yes, we potentially can sell these rooms. And now the next question is, we looked at the average rate, because we noticed on wholesale business, the average rate was 30% below the average rate that we were usually selling during high season. So, or even during high season, it was potentially even 40%. So when you think about substituting business in that case, you don't even need to substitute every day. You just need to potentially substitute 60% of the business and still make the same revenue, which is, again, very important because you sell at a higher rate, you're selling to a better client, to a higher price client, and you only need to sell 60% and still have the same revenue. You have to clean less rooms, you have to take care of less clients, you have to take care of less operations, which again saves you a lot of money. So that is obviously something a lot of hotels should consider when they talk about these kind of business and potentially can substitute that business for something else. So let's take the situation of, yes, we can potentially substitute the business. Then one day you're going to approach real life. Real life means you turned off the wholesalers and potentially you not want to work with them at all. Or you potentially work with them on a commission-based scheme, so you basically treat them like any other OTA. So how much experience do we have on that? And that's actually a very interesting question because we've been doing this with a lot of hotels, and a lot of our partner hotels turned off wholesalers, which is nevertheless quite new and quite recent. So most of the contracts usually start in March. So a lot of our hotels that we work with just finished in March, and we are actually now in the process of analyzing the outcome. It's very hard to give insights in short-term outcome, but we are actually looking in a few cases right now. But we also have cases of hotels that actually stopped doing this years ago. I mean, I worked for Hilton myself years ago, and with Hilton we stopped working on these models 2008 or 2007 even. And you can see across board that Hilton doesn't have a wholesale problem anymore, and Hilton is still there, right? So they didn't get bankrupt, right? So that's potentially the first sign that all the big hotel chains are exactly doing this, and they're still there, and they potentially have a higher profitability than before. The other thing is, and I can show you a little example here of one hotel that we are working with in Germany. And this hotel was actually one of the largest GTA clients in the past. So if you basically look at these numbers, you can see that this hotel in 2014 made 150,000 euro revenue. Yeah? In total, they made 1.6 million. Now they turned it off, and the year after, and then they made a slow phasing out. As you can see, over the months, revenue slowly declined. In the year after, they made almost 50,000, 60,000 less through Gulliver's Travel in that case. The total revenue of the hotel went up to the previous year. And you can see, for example, how much revenue went into the website compared to the year before. So you went from 50,000 to 73, and other channels also substituted, obviously, the loss of the wholesaler. And in 2016, we're even going even more way because even more business is going into other channels. So the big question is always, how much and how does business travel? You can do a little test yourself. If you still work a lot with wholesalers and you want to find out of how much of these wholesalers are actually giving you protected business, ask your clients. If you want to find out if a wholesaler sells online or not, or if a wholesaler really brings you business through travel agents, and that is business you potentially cannot substitute, then just ask your clients. Every person that arrives in your hotel is actually providing you with a voucher. So why don't you ask or train your reception people to ask every person that checks in with a voucher from a wholesaler or a tour operator on how this client booked the room? It's a very simple question. You can put a little piece of paper behind the reception desk. You can say, dear client, how did you book your room? Did you book it online, on the internet, or did you book it in a travel agency? And depending on the answer, you make a little cross on your piece of paper. And after 1 month, you basically collect all these check-ins via vouchers, and then you look at the list, and then you can see of how many people actually booked online and booked through a travel agent. And then you can filter this by GTA, hotel beds, or TUI, and then you can see how much business in your hotel really came through protected business or not. I can tell you the examples where we did this, that for many, many wholesalers, the number of online bookings was above 90%. And when we talk about above 90% of online bookings, we come back to our business because we know that these hotels have a lot of traffic on platforms like Trivago and TripAdvisor. So basically, if you now connect your own website to these platforms and actually shift that business away from these platforms into your own channel and try to gain visibility on platforms like Trivago and TripAdvisor, you can actually cover that business through your own website. But obviously not everything, right? You need to admit that your website might only have 1 or 2 languages. So yes, business might also come in through other channels. We obviously say very often we see shifts into Booking.com. A lot of hotels turn off wholesalers, and the first business channel that comes back is Booking.com. Yes, because Booking.com is active in 70 countries with 70 different languages. And that's still more profitable potentially than selling through a wholesaler, because margins are still, or costs are still lower on Booking.com than those wholesalers. You pay less commission and have less costs. So, I mean, that's normal, and that's something you need to obviously observe. You cannot do these kind of things without having a proper business intelligence. I very often have the experience where hotels make decisions like that against or pro wholesalers, regardless which way, but they're lacking the reporting capabilities of actually making the analysis of finding out afterwards if the decision was right or not. So I can only urge you, if you make an important decisions like that, please make sure you have your numbers in place, you have your reportings in place, and we are more than happy to support you on that. We have reporting guidelines, we have reporting styles, we have reporting templates, number templates that we can provide to you, where you can only fill in the blanks, and then you basically get a result and an analysis by the report that we provide to you. But please, whatever you do is always not about trial and error. It's about business intelligence, finding out before and after how your numbers have been influenced. I can tell you, for most of the city hotels, the situation is very obvious. In cities, business is predominantly online across the board. Even for people that book in a travel agent, people still research online. So, and as long as people book the room only without a flight connected, I think you have the chance with your own website to gain that business. And if you gain that business, you obviously still need to make sure that you have the visibility, that you have the billboard, for example, on platforms like Google, like TripAdvisor, and so on. So that is obviously very, very, very important. And you need to have your website in place and need to have an attractive rate and revenue situation on your website too. Yeah? For hotels in summer sun destinations, this whole thing is becoming much more difficult. Because in summer sun destinations, a lot of hotels are basically sold in combination with flights. So you need to give a net rate, and then people combine it with a flight, and in that case, the transparency around rate is completely different. In that case, I completely admit it's much more difficult to make sure that your own website is actually getting the business, because obviously nobody would travel to Egypt without adding a flight through a tour operator, for example. So in that case, yes, situation is different, but even there, we see a big shift in business to hotel only, because in summer sun destinations like Mallorca, even Turkey, even Bulgaria, Croatia, people can actually book a flight through a low-cost carrier, and then still book the hotel room only. And in that case, you're in the same situation. We have a lot of clients in Mallorca who are getting more and more business through their own website, but they have the right revenue strategy in place, and they are targeting people who booked a flight already and then shift the business to their own website. So this is something I can just help and support you with and give you guidance about how the business model works, how prices end up from A to B. Make sure to read your contracts. Don't oversell your hotel. Always think about sales partners. Can they deliver to you incremental business or not? Because if they cannot deliver incremental business to you, you're basically cannibalizing yourself, and potentially for a much lower rate than you actually wanted. And for that hotel I mentioned before with a 500,000 euro revenue, it's very obvious that this hotel will shift this business in their online channels. I mean, it's an airport hotel near Frankfurt. It's very obvious that this is a complete online business, that other channels like their own website, like the Booking.com and Expedia of this world, can easily help them to regain their business. And across the board for those hotels where we did that, I would say in 90% of the cases, we actually saw a positive, profitable outcome. And the other 10% at least didn't really lose. We're still now looking. We have some more hotels coming in now that we need to analyze. Still very interesting. Every hotel is different, I have to say. It's very hard to make a judgment across board. So it really depends on the city. It depends on the product. It depends on the brand. It depends on the pricing situation, how the situation really turns out. So we're obviously very much in doing a lot of analysis here, and we're very happy to share anonymously numbers with you later on down the road on how this turns out. And obviously, if you're doing this kind of decision and if you need support, we are more than happy that you contact us and share this with us, because we have experience with that and we are more than happy. Quite important is also that you speak with us when you have rate parity and when you want to connect to Metasearch. Because if you have a lower price somewhere else than on your website, your Metasearch campaign won't be successful. And then you end up losing money on spending money on your marketing campaigns, which is something we don't want either. So we have a very natural interest in supporting you on that issue and trying to give you some transparency. So far so good. 40 minutes of blank information. Is there any questions that you might have? No questions via chat or via telephone. Feel free. Okay. I think even if you have questions, I mean, you have our team. We have our campaign management team who is happy to support you on managing your Metasearch campaigns. You can always write to campaign@myhotelshop.de. We can always make an analysis with you for those hotels who do campaign management with us. We are more than happy to make analysis with you on how we optimize these kind of things. I think there are many, many solutions in place. It's not always an easy situation. I know that. It's not always an easy solution and decision to take. But I mean, you need to just make the analysis right. To make the analysis right, I think there's always a way to find a solution to that problem. But I think it's not good if you just keep the problems as they are, because as long as you sell prices on external channels that are lower than your own website, you're just sending the wrong message, which is harmful for the whole industry, I guess, in the end of the day. So I can just motivate you to tackle this problem. You can solve it, and we are happy to help you with that. So if there are no more questions, I thank you very much, and I'm going to stop the recording now for the webinar. And if there's anything else, we are more than happy to help you with that.